This movie's going to be a little hard for me to talk about, but not for the reason that you might think. Spoiler review for Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings. Off the bat, the main attraction of this movie is the action scenes, the choreography, and just overall the kinetic energy that comes from the action scenes. There's this wonderful sense of momentum that's present in every single fight scene that just gives each action scene just a great sense of energy overall. And I love the way that the Ten Rings are portrayed in this movie, even though it's not comic accurate. You know, they don't each have a different power like how it is in the comics, but there's so much gravity and just weight behind the Ten Rings and just so much power that it makes it a really notable weapon. We've seen power blasts from characters like Captain Marvel and Star-Lord, but you've never seen it with so much like force put behind it. Just the sound design and just the visuals overall just really emphasize that. And you know, it's almost comparable to how they depict Thor's hammer. The sound design behind it is just brilliant, basically. It just makes you feel like, dang, there's so much just power within like this object. But overall, this is still like an MCU martial arts movie. I don't know how else to put it, because even though the choreography and the cinematography, it's all great for the fight scenes, you can clearly see what's going on, and you could see that the actors and the stunt people have put in the work. But you compare this to something like, let's say like Ip Man or some other like film produced by a Chinese martial arts company, it just doesn't have the right feeling to it. There's something missing, there's some, I don't know, just visually it doesn't look quite right. That's not a bad thing. You know, obviously each film has its own style, and like I said, it's MCU martial arts, and this is the MCU. This fits right in. But, you know, if the filmmakers were going for like a one-to-one, just like Chinese martial arts movie, like in terms of the fight scenes, they get it right in so many places, but there's something just, there's like a finishing touch to it that's just absent. And I don't know what it is. It's still good. It's just, it doesn't feel right if you're comparing this to a Chinese martial arts movie. And another thing that the action scenes really lend itself to the movie is the pacing, because pretty much almost every 15 minutes or so, there's an action scene, a pretty significant one at that, and that really helps keep the audience interested. I know it's that whole stigma of just like there has to be something flashy going on for like dumb American audiences to be interested, but in this case it's a martial arts film, so you know the action, like I said, is a highlight. It's a big part of the culture too, so it's pretty necessary. But you know, comparing that to something like Paper Tigers, I just watched that recently, there's only like 4 action scenes in that movie despite being a martial arts movie, and that really like kind of messed it up for me. The only time where I feel like the pacing kind of stifled was probably during the second act, because this movie does seem to be pretty big on flashbacks. It's not like there's just like one part of the movie in the second act where it's like all flashbacks, and maybe even in the beginning, because there are, but it's like, I guess you could say it's almost like Deadpool, where it's flashbacks throughout the whole movie at sometimes seemingly random times. I don't know. I would have to rewatch it to see if it truly was random or if it was called for. I'm sure it was, but it's just sometimes it just felt a little arbitrary for there to be like a flashback. Moving on to Awkwafina as Katie. She's fine. I'm still not a big fan of Awkwafina, but you know, as like a buddy character for Shang-Chi, she's fine, honestly. My question still stands, why did the Ten Rings bring her along? Why didn't they just leave her in Xiaoling's like building in Macau? Like, what's the point of bringing her? I guess you could say the point of bringing her is so that the characters could speak more English, I guess. Because that's another note that was really interesting and surprising to me. And also a great thing is that about, like, I would say 45% to 50% of the movie is in Mandarin. Like, that's crazy. A lot of this movie is subtitles, and that's great. But yeah, I noticed then that, like, when Wenmu speaks to his children, but like Katie is around, you know, he's speaking English to them when, you know, obviously they would naturally just be speaking Chinese. But Katie notes that she doesn't speak Chinese that well or speak Chinese at all. So I think that's the excuse for those characters who would be speaking Chinese to each other to speak English. I don't know why Wenwu cares that Katie understands what's going on, but I guess so. Another thing that Awkwafina is known for is bringing humor into movies, which, ironically enough, I feel like this movie has less humor than a lot of MCU movies, which is fine, because, like, I feel like the only MCU movies that should actively try to be comedies are the Guardians films and the Ant-Man films. Everything else could be just like small jokes. Moving on from that, something else I didn't really like about Katie's character was that she even pointed out herself, she learns how to use a bow for like an hour, and then she's able to shoot straight and like hit her targets and everything, like once maybe. So that's fine, but I don't know, it's still kind of weird. I just want to give a really quick shout out to a quick fight in the film, and that's the Shang-Chi versus Death Dealer fight in Macau, because that fight was fast. Like, they were trading blows. Like, I'm a sucker for quick hand-to-hand combat. That's why I love the Ip Man films. But dang, that was a great fight. That was one of the highlights for me. But I'm a sucker for final duels, and the fight between Shang-Chi and Wenmu is by far my favorite fight in the film. Despite all the CGI and everything that's going on, I just love their duel and their fight over the 10 rings and how they use it. Because especially when Shang-Chi gets the 10 rings himself, like, he incorporates moves from his dad and his mom. His mom has been teaching him all his life how to use the 10 rings. It's like when Tanjiro is taught sun breathing by his dad, but like subconsciously, basically, by just watching him dance. But you know, you see Wenwu use some moves against Shang-Chi, and when Shang-Chi gets the rings, he uses those same moves. He copies the moves, like movement for movement. And I find that awesome. But Shang-Chi also creates his own flair to it, because he's like using the 10 rings to like almost even fly and just swing around. Like, overall, I just found that so fun to watch and just exciting overall. And yeah, on to Wenmu as the villain of this film. The core of the story relies on the family dynamic, because between Shang-Chi, Xialing, and Wenwu, there's this triangle that's created between them where it's, you know, there's like mutual, like, trying to rebuild relationship slash hatred slash dislike between the three of them. They all have like their different feelings towards each other, and the whole movie is just trying to resolve those feelings and those relationships, basically. And overall, I felt like Wenwu was still just kind of a weak villain, but still stronger than a lot of regular average MCU villains that you'll see in like Doctor Strange or something like that. But it's weird. I think it's just a me thing, because all the factors are there, because you do see Wenwu, you know, and his family acting like a family. They're playing like whatever Dance Revolution video game. They're playing, you know, the little cheesy Toys R Us game with like the mat. It has the wires feeding into the mat and you're stepping on it. They're playing that. They played that in the flashbacks, and you know, they look like a really happy family. So, you know, seeing him, and I totally understand, because he's a grieving, you know, widow, basically. You know, on paper he seems like a good villain, but to me, when I watched it and just what I feel, I just still don't feel Like, he was that great overall. When he died, I didn't care too much, to be honest. Another thing I didn't really buy into is like Shang-Chi's kind of return after he's defeated by Wenmu. Also, that defeat at the hands of his dad did look really awkward to me. It almost looked like a really high-end YouTube like short film. Like, just the punch overall, it looked like someone trying to recreate like anime in real life, essentially. It's just like, it didn't look bad, but it's not of the quality that I would expect from, you know, a high budget Marvel movie. It just didn't fit right with everything else to me. But essentially what happens is, you know, Shang-Chi is knocked into the water by Wenmu, and it looks like he's knocked out and he might drown, I guess. But the Great Protector, you know, awakens and basically saves Shang-Chi. I felt like that was way too quick. Just Shang-Chi, you know, being knocked into the water and then pretty much immediately coming out of the water with the Great Protector. It just didn't feel earned at all to me. But I suppose that's not what they were going for. They weren't going for like a fake death, because I'm pretty sure no one was even worried that Shang-Chi was going to die at all within the movie. You know, it's not like a Black Panther situation where it's a transition between Act 2 and Act 3. You know, in this movie, we're already in the climax. Shang-Chi just got knocked out for a little bit. That's essentially what happened. It's almost like, you know, in Endgame, Thanos throws Captain America to the side, but then like 4 minutes later, Captain America comes back stronger than ever with Mjolnir, essentially. So I guess it's more akin to that. But still, it just felt kind of random, I guess, with, you know, why didn't the Great Protector come out earlier, or just yeah, it just, the timing didn't feel right to me. So, would I rewatch Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings? Yes, definitely. You already knew the answer. The action is just so fun, and the story, while it is standard, it's very standard, it's still better than a lot of average Marvel movies. Side note, something that I really liked was, by the end of the movie, I like that Shang-Chi gets like the physical 10 rings and he keeps that, but Xialing, you know, his sister, keeps the other half of the 10 rings, the, you know, the organization itself. It's cool that, you know, the kids are basically taking over their parents' legacy. I really like that. So, how soon would I rewatch Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings? I would say I need like 3 days to a week. And that doesn't mean that the movie's any less than really good. It's just that this movie is an event for me. And I've had this movie on my calendar for the past 4 months when that first trailer dropped. And, you know, it's like you plan a Disneyland trip, right? And you're on that trip, and the trip is amazing. And then after the trip is still amazing because you're just thinking back on all the great things that happened. And, you know, of course you would like to go back and redo it all again, but doing so soon after the initial experience would just spoil the moment. And that's exactly what I'm going through right now with this movie. I just need to settle into the fact that I've watched it at this point. You know, all that time just researching the character and reading the comics and buying the figures, listening to the soundtrack, watching every interview with Simu, watching all of Kim's Convenience. I need to just slow down and just kind of cherish the fact that it's all finally just come to a close, basically. Yeah. But that's just me. That's just my specific case, because, you know, I already know my friends have rewatched this movie. It's only Saturday or something. And, you know, they've offered to have me rewatch it with them, but I'm like, no. I have a moral code, I guess. I can't watch my Shang-Chi viewings within 24 hours of each other or something. But yeah. So, that's it for my Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings movie review. It's over, pretty much. That's it. And go ahead and like and subscribe. and tell me what you think in the comments. Watch out for my next video where I'm either going to be building a Shang-Chi Lego or I'm going to be comparing my prediction video to what actually happened in the movie. Go ahead and talk about it in the comments. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.